Okay, so Vie Jester, welcome to In the Chair with. How the devil are you?
Good.
We're doing good,
man.
Thanks for having
Good.
us.
Yeah, good. Glad to hear it. So, for those that don't know you, firstly, shame on them, but we're going to try and get as many people to know you as possible. Tell us about your band. What is it you do?
Sure. Well, I'm Kyle. I'm the guitar player and singer. This is Cliff. Working on our background there. There's our logo.
Yeah, I did that myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
But you did it properly. You did it before we started. Anyway, yeah. We've been in a band since we were kids, actually, but we started Vie Jester officially in
2007.
Yeah, but we came out with our first EP. It was 2012, I believe.
Yeah.
And so that's called Cognizance. That's on Spotify. But Cliff and I grew up together, and we've been playing music since we were 10 years old. So it's been a lifetime of music. We're almost 40 now, so we are 40 now. So
yeah. No, indeed, child of the 80s.
Exactly.
So,
And
I mean, that's a pretty cool thing, because I like some of the best friends that I had that I played with music, the life kind of depart, you go different ways. So to actually kind of form a kind of a brotherhood, both in terms of an interpersonal relationship but also musical. I'm assuming you have a sort of string of bands behind you and ideas and stuff as you went along. Has it always been along the lines of kind of progressive stuff, or did you kind of like start out as like a fresh thing? Let's copy Metallica or something.
Yeah, back in high school, we used to cover Pantera a lot, and we would play even death metal like Cannibal Corpse.
Yeah.
So it kind of started from there.
Yeah, our first band was death metal orientated, and even though we have always kind of played more in the rock genre together, Cliff spent a lot of time listening to fusion and jazz, influenced by those drummers, the great, Buddy Rich, big band era type stuff, getting his drum chops down. And I kind of drifted off into classical guitar and Brazilian, like bossa nova.
Oh, wow.
So we definitely kind of went our separate ways, but always came back to the heavy stuff. And those separate influences have found their way into our music for sure.
I think that once you kind of like form a relationship with kind of just heavy metal, or certainly once you go down the extreme end, the death metal and black metal, it always stays with you. But you start out, you say, I want to do this, I want to do that, and then your mind kind of opens, and then you start taking all of this stuff. I love a lot of Indian influences and all this kind of Persian stuff in my composition, and I won't say that I've ever been proficient in jazz theory and all that kind of stuff, but I do love it when people kind of bring these different kind of elements and colors, and ultimately you come back to a more progressive state than you were, even if you were continuing to do death metal, but it would be enhanced by all of that color.
Exactly.
Do you ever just posing a question, do you ever feel that you kind of want to go and do like a bossa nova like independent thing, or to do a little kind of jazz thing? Do you wish not being a purist, having learnt those experiences, or is it just totally just cool that you just end up doing this prog rock metal stuff that incorporates everything?
That's a great question. Yeah, there's definitely an interest.
Smackdowns.
Yeah. There's an interest in doing those other types of things, and we have a side project that we perform for corporate events and restaurants where we actually do play the more mellow stuff. But we always come back to the rock era type stuff. So a lot of what we do in our band called the Smacktones, which is like a cover group for mellow acoustic type stuff, is we play a lot of the grunge alternative era stuff that was acoustic, like the Alice in Chains, the Temple of the Dog, stuff that you can get away with playing acoustically. And occasionally, I'll work in the Frank Sinatra, a little bit of the bossa nova, Van Morrison, right? Yeah. So I'll do some Antonio Carlos Jobim, which is bossa nova style. And in that environment, Cliff doesn't have like a jazz kit. He's got more of like a cocktail and percussion type of a kit. So we have our avenues for that style, but from what you were saying, like to really go down that direction as a purist, it's tough because you got to have a lifetime of dedication to those crafts as well. And
competition is massive.
Yeah, I think our focus has always been more metal, so that's definitely our specialty. But you know, we love bringing in our inspiration from other places, and you know, even though we can probably get away faking some of the other genre type stuff for a little while.
I've chopped it kind of just I do like sort of symphonic progressive, a bit of black, a bit of kind of death, just anything that I write as a composer. And in my advice to other musicians, I always just say, just write what makes you feel good. Whatever comes out, doesn't matter if it's not what you anticipate. It just, you know, if it's pushing you, and if it's come from within, and if you just add a bit of flair, a bit of this, even if you're just fake jazzing interlude or whatever, because you've just learned something a bit new and you've run with it. So, you know, that's totally cool. Here's a question, because you mentioned these performing these kind of more chilled out sets in corporate venues and stuff. Now, we all are fighting to kind of get our X amount of thousand listeners on Spotify, and then you've got the job of actually maintaining them, because after the release is burnt out, then the number, it all goes down, and it's the society that we live in. And you two probably put a whole lot of effort into, well, look at the image, the band, the music, and all that kind of stuff, and that's where your heart is. Is it not disappointing in some aspects that you know, the mainstream kind of the corporate money, the money is only in like the corporate expected types of stuff? Does that not sometimes get a bit deflating?
It can, but you just have to have the passion of the music to drive
Mm-hmm.
you through that, because that's why we're really doing it.
I mean,
Yeah. I was just going to say that it's first and foremost for sure a passion project, right? It has to be, unless you're produced and created by a label, right, to do one thing, which is just to make hit records, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, I mean, it can still be your passion, but you're basically guided by industry at that point, which we are not. We're guided by inspiration and what we love to do, and the passion for the music. Is it disappointing? To some degree, yeah, because you've always have to consider the fact that if you want to be heard by a larger audience, you're probably going to have to adapt in some way.
Mm-hmm,
so there's always that give and pull. How much do we want to consider? Because right now we're in the process of releasing a new album. So it's a conversation every once in a while, is how badly do we want just one song on here to be the single, right? But this is a common conversation that bands have. And you know, I feel like unless you're doing something really unique, or you've got a gimmick, so to speak, that you're marketing really well, then you're probably going to have to do that with just the music, right? You're going to have to do the trendy thing, or you know, adapt some popular cover tune. Which is one thing that we're doing, and we've always done covers, so that to us doesn't feel weird. We're not disappointed by the fact that we have to track covers, because we like doing it. So we have recently released quite a few singles of covers. We have Sex and Candy, which is an old 90s classic. We just put out Pardon Me from Incubus. So yeah, we're doing those types of things rather than cater to them in our own original music. We're just saying, hey, we're just going to do the cover. Well, for example, Sex and Candy, which is kind of like a very chill, mellow tune from Marcy's Playground in the 90s, we made that a modern tune in our own style. So that was fun, right? Getting creative with that, rather than how do we adapt our music to something that's fresh. So that's been our approach.
That's actually quite something, because a lot I see. I manage a small label outside of Cupchairs, and a lot of the things that I see, it's difficult to get an artist to get their own music to the masses. But when they pick something out from the masses and then do it, suddenly it's like, oh my god, this is a weird, fucked up death metal cover of insert, I don't know, Britney Spears song or something shit like this, you know. And all of a sudden that's got views, and then suddenly the silent almost appreciators of this music that could possibly step into the market are now introduced to it, and then things kind of build from that. It's a funny way of going about it. It's your intrinsic talent is often not enough, and you do have to have this slice of, you know, what the whole world likes. But going back to the point about the corporate gigs versus the Vie Jester kind of project, at least, you know, what you have is you're always doing something that's focused on music, and
right.
I'm a big encourager for those who are musical in any sense, just to keep aiming at something, and you'll find that as you go along the way, other bits and pieces come along. They might be very loosely attached. It could be video editing for a band, it could be doing a bit of corporate piano work or something, but it's just right. You put all of those little bits together, before you know it, you can be full-time music, you know.
Yeah, it helps you to flex that muscle, you know, that creative muscle, the live music muscle. Being in different, you know, environments of performing, there are different skills required. So if you're in a environment where you're playing a corporate gig or you're playing a restaurant, the skill is going to be, well, how well can you read the room and blend the music in so your ear is now catered towards dynamics, right? Because you don't want to be too loud or too quiet, or, you know what I mean? So you're looking at different things, whereas you're not worrying about that when you're on stage in Hollywood, because that's somebody else's job, right? You're worried now more about your performance skill. And so I'm going to say worried, I just mean like you just have to focus on these things. You're not necessarily worried about it, but you're really getting to enjoy yourself and put on a show. And that's what we love to do. Like this is what we're in music for, is getting on stage. And that's not necessarily for everybody, right? There are people who they don't want to be in the limelight, so to speak, but that's where we thrive. And we get those opportunities right now only because it's what we're booking, is once a month, maybe every other month, where we're out somewhere in Los Angeles or in Southern California performing. And we love doing that. You know, that's where we shine. But it's helpful for us to maintain, you know, the chemistry of guitar player and drummer with any other environment. So we maintain that as often as we can.
I'm a Brit, so my perception of LA is through all of the movies and all of the kind of stuff. I mean, and that must be is it really a hugely competitive, busy kind of environment musically? Tougher than any other area? Yeah.
It is for rock, because it seems like in the last like 10 years, it's gotten less popular in LA, but it still has a pretty good scene, but like it's more like EDM is popular. Or like dance music and like hip hop.
When you go to Hollywood now, the 80s scene of rock and roll, you know, chicks and drinking and all that, it's just not like that anymore. I don't even know if it was like that even through the 90s, but
like the hair metal era.
There were still venues for live music all over the place, and those have all been closing down for more, you know, DJ EDM type larger venues.
Dancing.
It's changed. So the venues that we used to play, like in Hollywood, for example, there used to be an amazing venue called the House of Blues that we used to play at, and they tore it down to build housing units. It's like this legendary venue that had been there for so long, and they tore it down. They've torn down a few other classic venues. One classic one that still exists is called the Whiskey A Go-Go, which is on Sunset in Hollywood. And we played there a few times, and thankfully that one still holds up, and they still play rock music all the time. That's the classic one where Guns N' Roses, even further back, the Doors played there, you know. So there has been a shift in Los Angeles. It is super competitive, but it's more than competitive. It's there's a camaraderie, because in our genre of music, we're trying to keep that alive. So with all the other bands that are there, we're working together to keep that flame ignited. And there's still, when we go to those shows and we perform them, or we're just supporting our friends or catching a cool act that comes through, there's definitely that feeling of like, we're all trying to keep this alive.
Yeah, we have the same in London. London has always been a diverse capital, but it's obviously increasingly diverse. And our kind of scene is quite a lot of kind of grime, sort of, you know, the rap kind of stuff. And this has taken over. And just before that, it's everything, all the rock venues have sort of turned into clubs. There's pockets of London. A place I can instantly think of is Camden and Soho. You know, the live music is very much kind of alive there, but all these bands are kind of sort of propping up the scene. Even the venues are propping up the bands, and bands are propping up the venues, and there is a sort of a camaraderie there. And when you enter the scene, as I'm kind of sort of fresh to in this role, going and doing some gig filming and interviewing and stuff, you very easily you pick a favorite of something that's coming up, and then you want to just kind of sort of move them along to the next stage or help them out in some way, and you see that alive. And I do wonder whether the music industry got so much online that a lot of this ethic and a lot of this kind of community was forgotten for a bit of a period of time, and is now possibly, and maybe you don't feel it quite yet in the LA, but I feel certainly over this side of the pond that kind of resurgence back to the old school way of we're actually going to go to gigs, we're buying merch, and all this kind of stuff. I've worked with bands, it's like I never see them sell, you know, merch. This is all the online stuff. But you go to gigs, I see people paying hand over fist, and a guy will turn up and buy one of each of the roster. And I've been that guy myself. So I think it's kind of a coming back. I certainly hope so, for the sake of.
I have my opinion on that, but Cliff, what's your take?
On is it coming back? Yeah. In the last few years, I feel like it's increased a little bit. I think that more people are into rock music lately.
And as far as like the collecting and vinyls and those kinds of things, punk rock has always kind of been a genre where that's maintained.
Yeah,
kind of, you know, vibe of like you're always doing the what do they call that? The bootleg, right? You kind of attitude and approach, right? You want to get the cassette. For whatever reason, those are still around. The vinyls are coming back, right? And there's, you know, it's always a good community for merch and things like that. And that also trickles into the indie types of genres from what I've seen. Now, I also teach music, and I have the privilege to see the next generation come up and what their experience has been like with music, and having only lived in that world where you don't go to stores anymore to consume music, right? You don't go to the record store. In you know, where we grew up, it was Capitol Records or something like that, right?
Queue outside the shop, and you'd be able to buy the whole package and look at the book and test it out on CD players in the things.
Right.
These things are unheard of now. Yeah.
A really fun tactile experience, you know, but it's completely digital now. So in the new era, seeing kids have that experience of Spotify choosing what they listen to because they're just creating an algorithm, so it's just feeding the music, and that's cool. That's a whole different approach, but there's not necessarily as much of devotion to one artist because you had to go get the record, purchase the whole thing. Maybe just one or two songs got you to buy the record, but now you're listening to the whole thing because that's just how you consume the music. But what I've seen is that the students will still gravitate towards one or two artists that they really enjoy, and they'll still spend the time to try to learn more about them, right? They'll just say, hey, this artist has something unique, you know. Unfortunately, whether that's a look or whatever, we all kind of went through that phase where the looks really mattered, but the way that they consume music hasn't affected, in my opinion, the way that they're dedicating themselves to an artist or a band or whatever. I think it still kind of has hit that creative inspiration aspect of the listener in the same way, where they're like, hey, this person has a song that I really like, and then there's this other one that I like, and there's this other one that I like. Let me go see what they're like live. Let me go get their shirt or whatever. So
I mean,
I don't think a lot has changed in that way.
No, I mean, ultimately, people are going to go through a journey of discovering what they like. Firstly, that's going to be formed by their family and peer group, and then as they gain their own independence and they become a bit more sure of their tastes, then it's a case of, well, yeah, I like this, and I looked over there, I found this randomly, I like that. Now I'm going to go looking for more of that, and so then the individualism increases. So I think you're absolutely correct. We've talked lots about the scene, but let's talk about the band. Tell me how well, obviously it came about because you two work together so closely, but was there a specific idea behind the band, a specific concept? How did it sort of come into blossoming?
Well, we've been playing together since we were like literally little kids. So we both played guitar in the beginning, and then we kind of wanted to. We're really into Tool, and how they.
I see behind you. Yeah, is that Tool poster? Yeah.
Just the complexity of not necessarily the riffs, but like the timing, and like kind of like the out of the box. Like they kind of not a lot of other bands sounded like them. We kind of wanted to have our own sound. As hard as that is, we wanted to be original.
Yeah, I feel like we've always been inspired since young by bands who were technically proficient. And, it wasn't really till we got a little bit older that we discovered the complexity and uniqueness of Tool, but we really gravitated towards that, and a lot of our friends were super into it. The bands in the local scene that we were into in LA seemed to all be influenced by Tool. And that's kind of the scene that we were a part of and we chose to be a part of because of the way that our music sounded.
Yeah, we didn't want to sound just like them, obviously. Like, there's other bands that sound like clones of Tool,
Yeah.
We didn't want to go down that route.
I think we made a decision pretty early on that whatever our music was going to be, that we wanted to make an effort, just to some degree, not to a necessarily painstaking point, which I did at first, but I've gotten over. We want to make it a point to be different as possible on purpose, so making it a conversation about, hey, this riff or this melody sounds a little like this other thing. Is that enough to make us want to change it? Or do we not care? Is it a blatant ripoff? Is it really just our own creativity? Having those types of conversations when we encounter something that we think sounds like something else, because we can listen to records now of other bands in our genre and say, oh yeah, I remember hearing that on this other record from this band that did it a long time ago. And it's all good. Like, bands are just borrowing, they're just being creative. But for us as a band, I think we have those conversations maybe a little longer than other bands do. We're like, do we want to really change this to make sure that when we put a song out, people are like, yeah, this is something I've never heard before.
And do you think that honesty and that kind of pulling apart when it needs to be pulled apart is kind of born out of the fact that you've just been together for so long doing this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think that we're pretty intellectual about a lot of things outside of music that we connected on from very young. And I think because, like you said, we have been friends for so long that we can have those honest, open conversations. And I think also mostly it's just because that's something that we agree on, right? Because you could have two people who've known each other and done music for a long time, but one is just like super glow with the flow, whatever, man, this is just what's coming out. Okay, it sounds like somebody else. And then the other person's more intellectual in the sense of, no, actually that was on this record, on this album, minute 31, I know that riff, you know what I mean? And that relationship's not going to work long term, because the other person's going to feel like they're being overanalyzed, and the other person's going to not their needs are being met for originality or whatever it is. But we meet on that level pretty well. I had to calm down with it a little bit too much because it was actually stifling the creativity. It was like, okay, at what point do you say just open the hose a little bit, let it flow?
I was going to ask, over decades of kind of working together, has there ever been any point where you two have either sort of become a little bit too much for each other? And how did you iron that out? Because I'm sure it has got to have had to almost happen at some point.
Yeah, our third member, Matthew Dennis, he's the bass player. He kind of helped us in that aspect because he brings a different perspective, because he joined 6-7 years ago when we had already been together and been through a handful of bass players, but he's by far been the longest third member. Vie Jester, and he has a really good ear for what's popular in the genre. And he does a lot of production in his own right. Like he engineered the drums on the newest Nothing More at the studio he works at. Like he's really tapped into like what's popular in like gent and like hard.
Yeah, he's got that flavor. I was listening to the EP.
Yeah.
I don't have my Spotify playlist up, but forgive me. What was the name of the EP? You've just released a single, and then there was an EP before.
Yeah, Vex.
Vex. Oh, of course, it's right in front of me. Okay, yeah. I listened to that, and I can't remember what track. It might have been the first or the second one, but the bass just comes in from nowhere, and it starts really sort of just doing this gent slap, and it's like. Yeah, rip your face off. Yeah, fucking amazing. I did kind of pick up some of the kind of the Tool vibe slightly, but it also reminded me in its quieter moments it's an Opeth album. It's one of their earlier quieter ones. It's got window pane on it. It'll come to me. I can't remember.
A Blackwater Park?
No, that's because that's heavy. Okay, I've got to do this now.
Yeah, look for it. I have definitely always appreciated the comparisons to Opeth because when I listen to them, I absolutely respect them, but I've never really listened to a lot of Opeth.
Yeah, we don't get compared to them that often.
It was fair.
Harvest?
No. It sounds like a 70s prog album. And it was one of her early ones. I think it's this one. It's Damnation, I think.
Okay.
It starts
I don't think I've heard that one.
Okay, let's give that a listen. It's called Damnation. It sounds like a 70s prog album.
Sure.
And
I'm familiar with Harvest. I think that was the only album of Opeth that I've listened to. And as far as 70s prog goes, I think you'd be hard pressed to find something better than King Crimson's first album.
Yeah. I don't mind a bit of King Crimson. I lean more on the actual 70s prog. I lean more to. I've completely lost your picture now.
Okay.
I lean more towards kind of Yes, the Rick Wakeman kind of stuff. Obviously, Pink Floyd. That kind of got me playing teaching myself guitar. After keyboards was my first instrument, and so I love all of that. But yeah, Crimson aren't a bad listen, but I've never been able to kind of absorb myself into them. But going back to the EP, the Vex, a bit of early Marillion. Have you ever heard any Marillion?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah,
it's like 80s prog.
The first 5 albums with the guy Fish as the lead singer. After that, it just kind of got very diluted, in my opinion, anyway. But yeah, there's some lovely colorings, and it was a very interesting listen because again, a lot of prog bands, as you say, can sort of, whilst being under the banner of progressive, can follow the formulas of those that have laid the foundations before, and I think it's very easy trapping to get to. Also, there was a Dream Theater album, sort of era that your EP reminded me of, and again, I can't remember.
Finn McKenty said, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Finn McKenty reviewed our song from Punk Rock NBA, and he said it reminds me of Dream Theater, but if they were cool.
Oh, okay. That's not a bad comment to be sniffed at. I'm trying to think of the album of Dream Theater, but I'll send it you. It's an absolutely cracking album. It's them at their minds, kind of, I don't know, slightly craziest without being too kind of dramatic and all of this. It was just a good, solid album, and it reminded me. No, okay. It wasn't that. It's after that, I think. Dream Theater, Dislog. Here we go.
One of the more technical albums, you're saying?
Yeah. It will come to me. Systematic Chaos, 2007.
Okay. I'll look that up.
It's a good album. It's a good album.
Is that when they first got? Oh no, that was like the last one with Portnoy, huh?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, my knowledge is a bit sketchy on that, but yeah, definitely worth a listen. But I loved it, and then I listened to the latest single, and that was very different in terms of rhythmical delivery, and I've yet to get my head around it. So I already like that, because it's challenged me as a listener. I listen to tons of music. I can't tell you how much I listen to. I was shocked when I got my Spotify year-end summary. I was like, I listened to that many, hundreds of thousands of minutes of music. But it's good. So, but tell me just quickly the name. Where did that come from? Must be a story behind it.
Sure, Vie Jester. Well, I think we kind of were just tossing around cool words, and jester was one that we were like, okay, well, what should we try to do with this jester word? And I think it just started off as jester something. I don't know, the jesters. It was very generic at first, and then Vi came about literally because I was looking for words that started with the letter V. So I think that's kind of how it started.
Oh.
But the idea of the jester to me was always really interesting because we looked at it from an approach of, you know, what was the jester really like? What if you look back through history, the jester wasn't just a clown. It was more of like the court's way of being able to entertain, but almost like a modern comedian who is tapped into politics.
Yeah,
kind of says the uncomfortable things, but in a way that makes it digestible.
Kind of like Jon Stewart on The Daily Show.
Sure. Right. We've always kind of gravitated towards that, and we've always liked bands that are like Rage Against the Machine and System of a Down, who are, you know, very culturally aware and, you know, tapped into modern things, but also, you know, like Rage Against the Machine dropped so much historical knowledge. But anyhow, so we liked that idea of what the jester was. So we attached to that as being part of the meaning of jester. And then for the word Vi is always something that I really liked because I am into competitive prize fighting. You know, it's not something that I do, but I used to train, and that is a word that is tossed around for
MMA and boxing.
For prize fighting. Yeah, MMA and boxing, those types of competitive sports. So we just kind of looked at it like Vi Jester, meaning basically we want that energy, that consciousness, that type of thought to do better, to grow, to pervade more of the human consciousness, so that people can speak about things that they don't like to talk about, but in a way that makes it acceptable. So that's kind of the energy, and we have those lyrics in our songs as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're trying to bring to the table. We want to be able to carry the torch. Maybe not as
it's not so on the nose like Rage Against the Machine.
Not as direct as a Rage. More in the realm of the way that Tool brings up a lot of these concepts.
More stoic.
More stoic,
yeah.
A little bit more ethereal, right? Tool has gotten really into the spiritual plane, which is cool. I dig that for them, you know. We're trying to find our balance in the mix of all that as well. So that's Vi Jester. You know, when I think of Vi Jester, I think of, you know, let's talk about the uncomfortable shit. And if we can make it a little quirky, a little funny, cool. But we want to make it okay to talk about things that sometimes people don't like to talk about.
Music was born for spreading messages and challenging people's kind of insight and stuff. I mean, this is the foundations of poetry and choirs and chants, and go back to eras when we were banging on sticks and drums in fields and places, and now it's grown. Now it's grown to progressive metal. I hope as many people get to kind of hear you through my efforts here today. Our efforts here today. You've got a new album coming out. Do you know when? Is that kind of nailed up? Yeah.
Yeah, it's scheduled to be coming out at the end of 2025.
Okay.
And also we have actually 2 albums, because we have a full cover album with unreleased songs. Like they're both supposed to come out in the next year.
Okay, cool. So you're going to keep an eye on the accounts and what have you, because you'll probably release it in like singles, bits and pieces.
Yeah, singles, and then teasing up to the full album.
So the single that we just released, Pardon Me, which is a cover of Incubus, that's going to be on the cover EP. And our plan is to continue releasing, and this harkens back to our previous conversation about, you know, how do we get the attention of the masses. we're just going to continue to do these covers of songs in our best, you know, approach. With Pardon Me, we kind of just did it as more as a straightforward song.
The tuning.
Yeah, the tuning's dropped. The guitars are a little heavier. Beyond that, it's pretty much the same tune. But putting our stamp on songs that we love and that we feel like could bring some attention to us as a band. So we've got a plan to regularly release EPs for covers. So keep an eye on that.
Go.
Pardon Me is the first single of that one. What's the next one that we're going to drop? We can probably just announce it.
A Perfect Circle, The Outsider.
Right. So we have a cover of The Outsider that we're going to be putting out there. And
like literally like within the next month.
Yeah. And we'll be dropping a couple of there. And again, this is going to be almost like a series that we're going to do of cover EPs to keep people interested while we, you know, take our time to really hone in our full-length albums. And this is going to be our first full-length album. We're really excited about this new album that we're putting out at the end of 2025. For us, it's a big major project because it's all self-produced, and in this modern day and age, that actually isn't going to sound as bad as maybe as it used to, because in the box mastering and producing and all that stuff has come a long way. And like Cliff was speaking about, Matt, our bass player, he has really influenced us a lot as far as the way that we're producing, because he is a engineer.
He works at a really nice studio. Yeah,
he works at a studio in South Bay. It's basically in the Los Angeles area, Orange County area. And he's fantastic. He's helped us out a lot with producing our own stuff. He has produced a lot of our previous releases. He's got such a good ear because he listens to, I would say, probably a little bit trendier metal and alternative stuff than we do. So when we're having that conversation, like we were mentioning earlier, of like, well, where do we want to go? Here's a version of this thing that we like that's dancing that line of original and trendy. And Matt will usually just flat out tell us, he's like, this is better. Not because he thinks in terms of what's going to sell more, but because that's just what he likes. And we can feel comfortable going with his opinion because we respect it. And, you know, he's an amazing musician himself. Awesome. So anyhow, we got him on the new record. It's going to be amazing. We've got 4 songs, you know, in the bank. We're trying to finish up our next batch of 4. If we can crank out more than that before the end of next year, then that's what's going to be on the record.
Excellent. Plenty to look forward to. Well, it's been amazing kind of having a chat with you. You can see our time is coming down. Definitely, maybe we can catch up with you next year when the full album is out. I'm sure your story is very inspiring. The way you've approached things will be of benefit to those watching. And you've at least got a listener here. I'll try and get as many people this side of the pond over to your channels as possible.
Oh, thank you so much, man. That'd be great.
Yeah, thanks for giving us a platform to chat with you, and we'd love to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Will do. Right, so you have a good afternoon, evening? You're in the afternoon.
The afternoon, yeah.
Appreciate it, man.
I'm on midnight, so but I'll get this interview out probably within the next couple of hours. Actually, I'm
good
gonna
meeting you, bro.
Late shift, so it's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Cheers. Take care.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
All right, you too. Appreciate it.